Well, as you know, I've been in favor of comprehensive immigration reform, which means making sure that we have border security, but also making sure that we're letting people come into this country.
We can't claim to be sanctuary. We've got to stop. But first thing, secure the border. After you secure the border, then we can deal with everything else. But secure the border first. Just as Republicans and Democrats, we should just agree that this is a crisis. We're going to secure the border right now.
So
we're not going to talk about anything else.
State Representative Mike Coffey, we'll hear from him a little bit later on. I chatted with him yesterday. He recently went to the southern U.S. border. Before that, Governor J.B. Pritzker answering questions of members of the media yesterday in Chicago. Welcome in. Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Tons to get to, including the conversation about immigration and the ongoing problems impacting not just Chicago, Illinois taxpayers and taxpayers across the country. Customs and Border Patrol say in the previous fiscal year, since October of last year, essentially through August, there have been 2.8 plus million encounters at the southwest border. And that's just what they've encountered, not people that have gone through undetected. 2.8 million just in the past year. Now, while New York has said that the border is too open now, they're dealing with 125,000 just in New York City. Compare that to Chicago, dealing with 15,000 non-citizen new arrivals in the past 13 months. And then compare that again to the 2.8 million encounters that they've had come across the southern U.S. border. So obviously this week we've talked a lot about this, especially with Governor J.B. Pritzker on Monday, sending President Joe Biden a letter saying that the issue is overwhelming. Illinois is not a border state. But it's essentially becoming one because of the influx of migrants and the growing taxpayer cost. Because it's well over $300 million just for Illinois. When you lump in how much Chicago taxpayers have had to foot the bill for, it's over $500 million in costs for those non-citizen new arrivals in the state of Illinois. Whether they're seeking asylum or whether they cross the border illegally, 15,000 are in the city of Chicago, sleeping at police stations. They're going to possibly be in base camp tents heading into the winter. That's costing $30 million. You've got a whole host of other issues, humanitarian issues, and so on. So Governor J.B. Pritzker sending a letter to the president on Monday saying we need more resources and more needs to be done. He fielded some questions yesterday at an unrelated event all about the immigration crisis impacting Chicago. So we'll hear from that. But we'll also hear a response from Republican State Representative Mike Coffey out of Springfield. He traveled to the U.S. border just recently. I think yesterday he said he got back 4 days ago. So he's back in central Illinois, and he explains why a central Illinois state legislator made a trip to the southern U.S. border. So we'll hear from him as well, and also his response to some of what we'll hear the governor say right now. All right, so again, it is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Let's hear Governor J.B. Pritzker on Tuesday, talking with members of the media up in Chicago. And first up, he talked about the letter that he sent to President Joe Biden and what ultimately he's looking to have the White House do for Illinois.
Well, I've been communicating with the White House for many, many months now, so don't get it wrong. Just because we have a letter that was sent to the White House with a set of requests doesn't mean we haven't put requests in over time over the last 13 months. So let's put that to rest. The congressional delegation is quite well aware and have had many conversations with me and me with them about what we need to do to support our asylum seekers that are here in Illinois. Many of them have advocated for the dollars that are necessary to support cities and states that are caring for people who are suffering from this humanitarian crisis. You've heard some of them speak of that, the Congress people and our senators as well. The problem is, as you know, the House of Representatives is not controlled by Democrats, and indeed it is controlled instead by people who are expressing their xenophobia and who are not helping to manage the crisis of people coming to the border, but instead exacerbating it.
So the governor claiming that it's xenophobia that is leading to people sending migrants to Chicago. He continues on talking about how this all is escalating. And in his messaging to the White House, He's asking specifically for them to help manage this, saying that it's uncoordinated, untenable, overwhelming, and
we know
more.
that we're starting to see more and more buses. It is, as everybody should recall, let's not forget why we're seeing those buses. It's because there are these border politicians, the borders of the United States have politicians who want to cause havoc in the rest of the country. They could have raised their voices. They could have advocated in a political fashion for comprehensive immigration reform. But as you know, those are the very people who are opposed to comprehensive immigration reform. So instead, they want to wreak havoc. They want to cause a political challenge for the president and for, the people of the opposite party from them. And so I wanted to make sure that we were, that everybody understands who is causing this issue for states across the country. You don't see him sending anybody to Idaho. You don't see him sending anybody to South Dakota or Wyoming or Missouri, states that are controlled by the opposite part, by his party. Instead, he's sending them only to blue states.
So,
is it time to close the border?
The question, is it time to close the border?
As you know, I've been in favor of comprehensive immigration reform, which means making sure that we have border security, but also making sure that we're letting people come into this country. But as I say, there are people who want to use this as a political issue. And for, 40 years now, I think we've all been watching as particularly the Republican Party has used this over and over again, their xenophobia being, wearing it on their sleeve about this issue, and instead not introducing anything that would be practical about accomplishing that comprehensive reform.
So there's the governor again talking about xenophobia from those who say that the crisis is out of hand down on the southern border, sending migrants to so-called sanctuary states and cities, Illinois being a sanctuary state with policies that Pritzker approved. He talks about having conversations with Texas.
Yes, but just to answer your questions, lots of communication between staff on my end and staff for the governor of Texas. And I've made it very clear that the governor needs to stop what he's doing and that we all should be working on reform together. He shouldn't have to deal with all of the folks who are coming across the border and staying in Texas. We should, again, have comprehensive reform. And the only way to take care of this problem is to get that done. But once again, you don't hear him telling Republicans that they need to go to work in Washington on behalf of reforms at the border. Instead, he's just sending busloads around the country and causing chaos, frankly, wherever he is doing that.
And coming up, we'll hear from State Representative Mike Coffey, who traveled to the border and said that it's really because these border communities are getting inundated and invaded. It's not xenophobia, it's a lack of resources. So they're sending them to sanctuary states and counties and cities. The governor talking about the costs.
I mean, you've heard how much we've spent at the local level in Chicago, in the state of Illinois. Hundreds of millions of dollars. I would say collectively we're talking about $500 million at least when you add what the city has done. So we need reimbursement for those dollars. They promised that. There was a fund to do that, but the problem got so big that there wasn't enough money. Now Congress needs to act, and you see how they're acting. They honestly can't put a budget together in Washington. It's particularly the House of Representatives. So now we have to wait till November 17th to see if they can actually pass a budget and whether they'll put dollars in that budget for the care of the asylum seekers that are coming to all of our states.
So we'll see if that happens, especially with the speaker situation in Washington that just transpired after the governor spoke about this. So a lot here. We'll have the response from State Representative Mike Coffey, who traveled to the southern U.S. border. He addresses the issue of why those border communities are sending migrants to Illinois and other places. He also talks about how this isn't just a immigration issue. This is much more severe than that, from humanitarian to a drug crisis to a cartel crisis. But Coffey also discussing the state's sanctuary city policies and how before anything else, the border needs to be closed, not comprehensive immigration reform. You could talk about that next, but you got to turn the spigot off. So stay tuned. We'll get to State Representative Mike Coffey's thoughts on this next here with Springfield's Morning News. So last segment, we heard Governor J.B. Pritzker talk about border politicians that he says are xenophobic, and that's why they're sending migrants from the southern U.S. border that have crossed either illegally or claiming asylum to sanctuary cities like Chicago and New York and so on. So the governor also addressing that he needs more resources because, well, states ended up more than $500 million in local and state tax dollars without federal dollars providing any kind of match. So what's the response from a Republican state representative? Well, State Representative Mike Coffey, he traveled to the southern U.S. border recently. He's the Springfield area state representative. And he went with a delegation of law enforcement, congressional leaders, state house leaders with the Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR. And here's what he had to say ultimately was the goal and what they learned being on the ground in the southern U.S. border. And here's Mike Coffey.
They brought down sheriffs and legislators from across the country to be with the Texas Border Patrol, the Texas State Police, the Texas Volunteers, to show exactly what's going on down on the border and all that. And, you know, I've had people ask me, what is a state rep from Central Illinois, what did you care about the border? Why are you going down there? And what I said to them is, I said, everybody needs to care about the border, because when we're spending $1.5 billion in free health care to illegals when our citizens don't have free health care, and now we're dispersing them across the state of Illinois, and the state is paying for that disbursement, it's a concern to every single citizen in the state of Illinois. That is our taxpayers' money that we work very hard for. That should either be put to a good use for our citizens or given back to the citizens. So I went down there, and I've got to tell you, it is heart-wrenching and heartbreaking. And I think it should be mandatory that everybody in leadership, especially, go to the border and just sit and talk with these people, because I had a perception when I went to the border of what I thought it was like, what we're talking about. And it's nothing like you think, and it's much more serious than you think. The governor is, when you talk about the governor's complaining about the aid that they need. Well, you have to understand, down there at Eagle Pass, that is a town of 28,000 people, and 50,000 illegals invaded in 2 days. These are poor counties that don't have the money, the resources. Some of these counties have 12 jail cells. They're having to process and bring all these people in and house them. And many, many times these are cartel members and, people, criminals. Not all of them. A lot of the people you see coming are family units. Where I was at, when you're in Eagle Pass, those are a lot of family units they're coming across. But over in McAllen, Texas, what they're concerned about is the cartel members, then people that are murderous, rapists, and all the criminal element are coming through as well. And this flooding of the border makes it easier for them to bring things across the border, such as fentanyl. And the Texas Border Patrol, we got there, we had meetings where they showed us undercover footage of what's going on. I mean, the atrocities that are happening are just absolutely disgusting. And I mean, it's heart-wrenching. So the humanitarian crisis is real. And by waving them all in, and all of the people down there, they will tell you that this crisis is just quadrupled under the Biden administration. Talk to them about, well, how was it? So that it's not just a Republican and a Democratic issue, that these people are not there. They're not on a political agenda, bashing administrations. They're just saying, under Obama, it was at this level. Trump, it was at this level. Now, boom, 4 times the amount under the Biden administration. So it's a real issue that is concerning everybody, and we need to help them. The thing that they want, and they think that is most important, is they want the cartels to be labeled as terrorist organizations so that they can go after them and fight them. They believe that they can stop the problem, but the federal government has got to help them. So while a lot of people are looking for aid for the people that we're letting in illegally, what we really need to be doing is manning the border and stopping. We have to secure the border and stop all of these people from coming in. And they went through different ways that you can do that. The money that we give to Mexico, the money that we give to all these countries, we have to dry that up unless they stop this, because they're not doing that, because they're getting money from the United States of America, as well as bringing drugs in and sex trafficking. And when I tell you about this sex trafficking, nobody talks about it. It is so horrific. I can't even explain it to you. They go in with these undercover videos and showed them to us what was happening. And I mean, it's deplorable. I mean, it'll make you cry. So as concerned citizens for our country, we also have to secure the border for these people, because what they're going through is absolutely unimaginable. And it's probably the most important issue facing the country today, because we can't afford it. And if Chicago can't afford it, and New York mayor and governor are complaining about it, how do they make these little people in Texas of counties that are only 50,000 people take it? They're down in McAllen, Texas. They have what they call the Texas border volunteers. These are just everyday citizens that sit out on these ranches and spot for the Texas Rangers and the Border Patrol, because they don't have enough power to do. So these people are doing this out of the goodness of their hearts to help their communities out and really to help secure America. So there's so much that goes into it. I could talk for hours about it, but it's definitely something that I think everybody in leadership needs to go. Republicans and Democrats, and quite honestly, they should go together as Republicans and Democrats so they really see what's going on, and just talk to these people. Don't go down there with a political stance or just go and see what's going on and listen to these people and have them talk to you about what they think should be done to secure border, what they can do, what they can't do. And I think it's eye-opening, and it's something that needs to be addressed.
So again, State Representative Mike Coffey recently just traveled to the border, seeing it firsthand, saying that the local communities there cannot handle the influx. They've had 2.8 million people they've encountered just in the past year. He says, before anything else, need to close the border.
Here's the first thing you have to do. First thing, number one, you have to secure the border, and you have to stop it. Then, after the border is secured, and that's a combination of the border wall, that's drones, that's more, patrols on the border and all that. And according to the Texans that I met with, they all are confident that if given the resources, we can secure the border. So that's number one. After you secure the border, then you can start to talk about the different avenues and things that you want to do. But nothing can be talked about until the border is secure. And this is not, many people have this misnomer that I think a lot of people in the United States say, oh, the Mexicans are coming across. No. They talk in certain areas, 30% of the people coming across are Chinese. And they all believe down there that it has a big thing to do with fentanyl. Fentanyl is being produced in China, sent over to Mexico and the cartels, and they're bringing it in. And the amount of fentanyl that's gotten into this country in the last 2-3 years has just doubled, quadrupled. I mean, the numbers are staggering. So you have to sit with them and see these numbers to know what's going on. This is a crisis for our children. This is not just an immigration crisis. I think people are only looking at it through one lens, and they see the people coming through Eagle Pass and say, oh, those mean old Republicans, they don't want any immigrants coming in here. That is not what's going on. This has more to do with a drug crisis and a cartel crisis and an invasion than anything else. And that's why we should go down and meet with these people as Republicans and Democrats, because this is not a Republican and Democratic issue. This is a humanitarian issue. This is a drug issue. This has to do with the Chinese trying to pollute our country and make us weaker. That's what the issue is about. It's not about these poor immigrants that are coming from all over. They're pawns in a system, and they're being used, abused, and tortured. So and we need to stop that.
Coffey, I asked him if Illinois needs to reverse its sanctuary state policies that Governor J.B. Pritzker approved, making enforcement of federal immigration law relaxed in Illinois. He says that needs to stop.
Absolutely. You cannot. We can't claim to be sanctuary. We've got to stop. But first thing, secure the border. After you secure the border, then we can deal with everything else. But secure the border first. Just as Republicans and Democrats, we should just agree that this is a crisis. We're going to secure the border right now. We're not going to talk about anything else but securing the border. That's the number one thing that we need to do. Secure the border today. Not tomorrow, not next week, next month, today. We have the resources to do it if the president and the federal government will give Texas, Arizona, California, Arizona, all of the resources that they need to do it. It can be done, and if they demand that we secure the border, we can do it. Don't worry about any of the other issues until you secure the border. Do that. Then after that's done, we can talk about everything else. But until then, secure the border today.
So while Governor J.B. Pritzker wouldn't say explicitly if the border needs to be closed, you've got him pushing for comprehensive immigration reform. State Representative Mike Coffey, who traveled to the southern U.S. border, even though Illinois is far from the action there, it's impacting taxpayers in central Illinois. And Coffey says, before anything else, we've got to shut down the border. All right, it is Springfield's Morning News. Way